Greetings. I was watching this video from a few nights ago on the Sister E account titled Georgia Pews, Faithful to God, YouTube. The video was undoubtedly a response to the two videos by me which were uploaded onto the Faithful to God account about the markings on the pews in the First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. However, and I want to be careful how I word this, but with all due respect to the participants, the video, their response was almost an hour and 15 minutes long, and it discussed a myriad of topics. It discussed vocab Malone, it discussed DNA, it discussed whether or not Pastor Richardson believes in the Trinity, but what it did not do was further the conversation in terms of what actually appears in the pews. Now, the reason why I said I have to be careful how I word that is because apparently Pastor Richardson and the young lady that was hosting this discussion were under the impression that I had been insulting them.
Why do we have to sit here and deal with these insults?
Correct.
We get called all kinds of names.
I must confess I was somewhat mystified by that, as I honestly feel that I was polite in my response. I did not insult Pastor Richardson, nor did I call him any names in the two videos which were uploaded to Faithful to God's account. And beyond that, equally surprising, he even made a passing reference to the possibility of taking legal action.
And technically, if I wanted to go legal on these guys, I can literally take a legal case out on them because they are defaming my character.
Correct.
Now, I realize this is a distraction from the actual topic, but I just wanted to share that I was surprised by that. You know, when I initially heard it, I sort of did a double take and thought to myself, did he really say that he could sue us? And if so, sue us for what?
Sue me for what?
And yet he clarified what he thinks he might be able to sue us for, and that's apparently for defamation.
Because they are defaming my character.
Oh, this is a defamation. Ground for lawsuit.
I honestly have no idea how the videos I narrated, which were later uploaded to the Faithful to God account, constituted defamation. I mean, I honestly, while I disagreed with him politely, I never said anything about his character or about his knowledge of the subject, although I may go into that in this video. This was the central premise of the two videos which I narrated. No matter what script or language one claims is present in those markings, one should attempt to demonstrate their position by pointing out and transcribing the distinguishing features therein. That's it. That's my whole argument. If you're going to claim a specific language is present within those markings, you should demonstrate such. Go to the actual markings and point out the distinguishing features that establish your position. That's it.
This is defamation.
Now, I admit I'm being a bit playful by slipping in those movie clips there, but I do that because I was honestly surprised that they went that route. They were responding to two videos which were merely arguing that anyone who claims that a discernible language is present in those pews should actually present a case in favor of their position. That's all. And I even gave examples of how one might go about that sort of approach. And yet, they produced a 75-minute video which covered a variety of topics, and yet did not make an attempt to actually establish their position. But I digress. I've spent nearly 4 minutes on this introduction. I think it's time to actually get into the actual discussion, and I want to show a salient portion of the discussion where Pastor Richardson at least makes an interesting methodological point. A methodological point I agree with, however, with all due respect to him, I feel that he applies this methodological point inconsistently. He's going to rightly argue that if someone's going to claim it's Aramaic or Arabic, they should be able to translate it, to read it, to state what appears there. Now, as you listen to this, ask yourself if he applies the same rule to himself.
So those writings on those pews is a Shemitic language, is not Arabic, because if it was so, then how come they still haven't translated? Was able to read it. It's not Aramaic, because if it was Aramaic, whether it's modern or ancient or whatever, how come they still haven't been able to translate it?
Correct.
But they were in awe when I showed some of the letters from the guys in combination with the Shemitic language. Now, I'm not saying that I can read what's on the pews, but I can identify some of those letters.
Did you catch that? He rightly notes that if someone's going to say that it's Arabic or Aramaic, they should be able to read it, or at least they should be able to present some sort of a case in favor of their position. If they can't read it, if they can't understand it, then how can they claim that it's Arabic or Aramaic? It could be something else. But then he himself admits that he cannot read what's there, what's allegedly there. And then that begs the question then, how did you reach the conclusion that it's Hebrew if you can't read it? The rule that applies to Arabic should also apply to Hebrew, and as well to any other language claim. If someone claims that in those markings is discernible Japanese or Yiddish or Aramaic or Arabic or English or Spanish or Hebrew or Amharic or whatever, that person should be able to present a case for it. If they can't understand what's there, then it really begs the question, how did they reach the conclusion that a specific language is present there? That said, I found it interesting that Pastor Richardson expressed confidence on multiple occasions that no one would be able to read what appears in those markings.
That guess what? They can't tell what that is on those pews.
Yeah.
Even some that's trying to say that it's Arabic or Aramaic and all this other stuff. They make it clear they don't know. They're not going to be able to tell you what's on those pews. They can't read it, and that's a fact. I can guarantee you they will not be able to read what's on those pews. That's a fact.
I must confess, I find it very interesting that he's so confident that no one will be able to read what the markings that appear in those pews. And the reason why is because my actual position is that I don't see any discernible language therein, whether Arabic or Hebrew or Aramaic. Now, yes, in the second of the two videos which I narrated, I put forth a thought experiment in which a hypothetical case was made for the Arabic appearing therein, but that was only to show what an attempt to present one's case might look like. I wasn't actually endorsing the position. Now, it's worth repeating that Pastor Richardson is among those who are unable to discern any coherent words or sentences within those markings. He himself cannot read what's allegedly there. And not only did we already show that, but he clarified it again later in the discussion.
And that's what I think somebody asked that question of, does he know what's on the pews? And I think you did say at the beginning that you know what's some of the words that are on the pews.
Well, I can identify some of the letters, put it that way. I'm not going to say I know the words. I can identify some of the letters.
So Pastor Richardson himself does not recognize any words, much less phrases or sentences, in the markings in those pews in that church in Savannah, Georgia. Rather, he feels that certain markings resemble characters from Hebrew cursive or maybe the Ge'ez alphabet. I want to be clear here that I am not attempting to defame Pastor Richardson, nor is it my intention to insult him or ridicule him. But this is precisely the methodology that was tackled and discussed in my first video on the subject. Here's a rule of thumb I put forward in the first video I narrated. The presence of a marking which resembles a character employed in the script of a language is not, by itself, sufficient for demonstrating the presence of that language. And in that first video, I gave a number of examples illustrating that point. If all one has are random markings which somewhat resemble certain characters employed by certain languages, that's not enough to establish the presence of that language. That does not present a case for the presence of that language. As I showed in the second video, a case can be made not only for some of those markings resembling Arabic characters, but even Arabic words, even Arabic phrases right out of the Quran, the last chapter of the Quran. Now again, I don't actually endorse that position, but there is some irony here, as it seems that the case for Arabic is even stronger than the case for Hebrew, apparently. Whatever the case, as this video draws to a close, I'd like to recall the methodological point made by Pastor Richardson, which he repeated later in his discussion.
If they're going to say that it's Arabic, then read it in Arabic. If you're going to say that it's Aramaic, then read it in Aramaic. If you're going to say whatever, read it to me. Mm-hmm. Read it to me. Because if that's the case, then they'll be able to read it.
Now, I agree with Pastor Richardson. If someone is going to claim that Arabic appears in those markings, they should present their case. Same thing goes for someone who claims that Aramaic appears in those markings. And the same thing goes for any other language. If you claim that Amharic or Yiddish or Spanish or English or anything, Vietnamese, Japanese, any language that you claim appears in those markings, you should present your case. However, while I agree with Pastor Richardson on that point, I hope that he will agree that in all fairness, the very same rule that he applies to others should also be applied to him and those who agree with him on his position. That is to say, if you're going to claim that Hebrew appears in those markings, you should present your case, or as he put it, read it to me. If all he sees are certain markings resembling certain characters, then that's not an actual case for Hebrew being present. As I said, you can make a stronger case for Arabic being present, and I'm saying that as someone who doesn't actually endorse the position that Arabic appears in those markings. Now, in that discussion, the young lady who hosted the discussion said that there should be a dialogue on this topic. And I agree. I'm actually interested in that. I would love to correspond on the subject, or we could speak on the telephone or whatever. Although I don't think we need to be on at the same time, I would just like for Pastor Richardson or anyone else who endorses that position to make a video, or even to make a blog post or an article using photographs, something which actually presents a case, points to the markings, points to what they think they represent, and then demonstrate the presence of language, not just by pointing to random characters, but actually pointing to something indicative of actual language, which is to say words, phrases, sentences. Otherwise, with all due respect to anyone who takes such a position, whether it's for Hebrew or Arabic or anything else, the person doesn't actually have a case for the presence of a given language if they can't point to the presence of something indicative of language, like words, phrases, sentences. Now, as I said, I would be interested in discussing this with Pastor Richardson or with anyone else. We can discuss it over the telephone, and we can correspond on it. Someone told me that Pastor Richardson is on social media. I would love to correspond with him on social media. I promise to be respectful. However, I want to say that what I would want to focus on in any such discussion is on the markings themselves. I don't think it's proper or auspicious or prudent to go into other subjects, to try to discuss history or to discuss the possible motivations of various folks. Let's just look at the markings objectively and see if we can find anything resembling discernible language. That's what I'd like to do. That's what I'd like to discuss. On that note, I hope it's been clear that it was not my intention to mock or ridicule or insult or defame either Pastor Richardson or the young lady who interviewed him or anyone else who agrees with the position that Hebrew text is found in the pews of First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. I look forward to the comments of others, whether through videos or social media, text, telephone calls, whatever. And on that note, I'll close here and say to all, God bless.